Hello, good morning. Welcome to new character, new costume. So we're kind of gonna speed run this one. I'm not going to lie, I have about 2 weeks until I'm wearing it at con. So this is not gonna be like everything that I want it to be. And I don't know fully what's really happening, but what I do know is all of the fabric is coming from my stash. So because of that, I'm using some very specific fabrics. I love a dull spandex knit, like a swimsuit knit. I love it. I do all of my like bodysuits, all my knit costumes out of that pretty much. So I have a lot of it in my stash from old projects. So yeah, we're gonna be using that. So here we go. We're going. And I think we're doing it all in one because of my time limit.
All right, everyone, it's time to lock in because we're getting right into this. So to draft the capelet pattern and just a basic cloak pattern, you want to take a front piece and a back piece and put them on a 90-degree angle and then match up the armhole shoulder points. You want to leave a little bit of space in between them. And I actually drafted this pretty much without any seam allowance, which ended up being totally fine because I knew I was only using 1/4 inch seam allowance. But draft them, like slightly farther apart if you want to do that than I did, probably. But you're basically going to trace your shapes and then draw a perfect 45-degree angle line down the shoulders. And that is basically going to be your side seam for the cloak. Now, I knew I just wanted this to be a waist length capelet, so I measured from the neck hole to the waist and then traced that line across the neck hole. This is basically what you would do for your hem length. You would just take the length that you want it and go along your neck hole and trace that. I also decided to put a notch in right where they connect on the shoulder. I didn't end up using it, but I feel like it would be helpful for some reason. And then to draft the collar, I have the lengths of my neck holes written out on my base patterns because I never usually change it. And so I'm making a straight line with a squared off back for the back piece. And then I'm measuring out the front piece and then taking the front corner up a 1/4 inch. And then I actually found my French curve, so I went in with that and just lined it up perfectly to get a nice curve for the front of my collar. And then I just copied that shape to the top with how wide I wanted it. Now, I made a mistake here at not looking at my reference photos, but the front collar of this is actually very square and it also has an overlap. So I didn't end up drafting the overlap, but because it's a stretchy material, I kind of faked it, and there was 3 or 4 layers to the collar compared to the 1 layer of the capelet, so it worked for me to be able to stretch the collar over a little bit on one side. And I did just keep it lined up on the shoulder seams for the collar and then just stretched one side, and it looked fine. I also drafted the front and back bodice wrong because I didn't look at my reference photos. Everyone, look at your reference photos. But they basically just have a princess seam in there, and I figured that out when I was cutting it out, and it was totally fine to just cut it out and guess what a 1/4 inch seam allowance was. Anyways, for knits, you usually use a 1/4 inch unless you're doing something kind of crazy, then I would recommend something larger. I use 1/4 inch because that is what my overlock sews. So yeah. Now I did some fun things to this knit sleeve after I traced it all out. I started off by transferring the exact center of the sleeve pattern as well as the elbow notch, and then I went straight down off of the armhole seam and made this a straight sleeve instead of a fitted sleeve. It was still pretty fitted just because of how tight my sleeve pattern is. I definitely could have gone for a flare, but I think the image was achieved. For the collar, I made the base of it the exact length of the hem of the sleeve, and then I think I went up about 4 inches for the depth of the collar, and where it was going to be sitting up the sleeve, I just took out each side about a 1/4 of an inch to give it a little bit of a flare. I would go out more than that if you were making this pattern. I would go out quite a bit more than that because her cuffs are a lot wider than mine were. And then to draft the placket for the sleeve, I just laid a little piece of paper over and I transferred the length as well as our center so that I would have a very good base. And then I went in and I drew how long I wanted the point to be before I moved it off. And I gave it a little bit of an angle just for a little bit of flair, a little sass, you know, something fun. And then once I had all of the lines how I liked them, I added my 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I folded it in half to cut it out so that I don't have to guess where those lines kind of are. You know, I just know this is going to be exactly mirrored, as long as I'm good with scissors. I did kind of go in and readjust the point a little bit just because I felt like it was a little too pointy, if you catch my drift. So I just put in another small angle, which actually didn't end up really showing in the final product because of how I sewed it. But I liked the concept and it was more subtle and roundy. To draft the capelet placket that goes along the side seam, I just measured how long approximately I wanted it, and then I wrote that down. And then I basically just took our sleeve placket and marked out how long this new one was going to be and traced the bottom width so that it would stay the same, and then put the point up at the top where it needed to be, traced the top point, and then just drew new, more subtle lines. So it is exactly the same at the top and the bottom, but you probably wouldn't be able to tell unless you look at it like really close. For the circle skirt, okay, there's going to be a lot to talk about here, I'm not going to lie. I found out recently that you can actually go to Mood Fabric's website and they have a circle skirt generator there. So you just put in your waist measurement, the fullness that you want your circle skirt, so half, 3/4, or full, and then they will tell you exactly how wide your waist measurement needs to be. So I did my math wrong here, I'm not gonna lie, because it ended up too wide for my actual waist. But I ended up doing a 3/4 circle skirt with a 7-inch quarter waist measurement. And you basically just take a tape measure or a piece of string and you measure 7 inches down from a right angle point, and then draw a half circle and take your hem down from there. Sorry, I didn't leave myself enough circle skirt time, I'm not gonna lie. For the shirt, now that we're into the sewing, this was so abrupt, sorry. I made my own stripes with some scrap material. I basically just cut out 2 inches and then overlocked them all together. And my stripes were not wide enough, so I ended up having to take out some more material than just these princess seam panels, side seams, whatever. I'm lost, kinda. And a good trick, if you don't fold over your seam allowances to cut off the corners, is to just make little dots of your seam allowance and then cut across those, and that should be perfectly lined up to line up at the edge of your seam allowance. So there's no more guessing when you have a weird point.
Hi, sorry if the lighting is weird. I've kind of been set up at the kitchen counter for a while now, but I actually have started attaching the trim around the hem of the skirt, but I was an idiot this morning because I was trying to just get it done fast and I sewed it on the wrong way. Luckily, I only sewed half of it on, but it was exactly half. I also did my skirt math wrong, which is not surprising. I just didn't account for how tight this shirt was going to be. So it was quite a bit bigger. So I just did these little pleats in the center when I attached it. And then I also did the stripes a little wonky and they weren't quite wide enough for the pattern. So I was looking at some photos again, and she does have these little like princess seams where it's only stripy in the middle, and then I still wasn't quite enough, so I took out a little bit of the shoulder armhole as well, and I made those just white because why not? And then also the stripes don't like line up perfectly, especially on the waist where, you know, the front is nice, it has that little section of black that'll be under the belt, but then the back is just all white, which is how I wanted the front to look originally, but that's not what happened because of the way that they fit onto the striped sections that I made. Basically, I was just cutting sections of scrap fabric into stripes and sewing them together, and I didn't account for how actually wide the pattern pieces were going to be. But you know what? It looks great, actually, and there's going to be a capelet over it and everything, and it's gonna be totally fine. So for this, I basically just need to do the gold on the bottom of the skirt and attach the cuffs, but I need the plackets for the cuffs before I can attach the cuffs. The cuffs are done, they're just in the garage. And then we have to cut out the rest of the gold for the capelet. I have the capelet just like sewn together, just, you know, whatever. And then we have the collar for that, which looks really interesting right now, but it'll be fun and fine once it's all together. And I also realized that I'm gonna get to cheat a lot of these because I'll get to sew on them in a straight stitch because they don't necessarily need to stretch, which is great for me because I hate top stitching with a zigzag stitch. I think it looks bad. Anyways, yeah, we just, we have a lot of little things cut out for us that we just need to like really pay attention to from here on out. So I need to just like put on a slow audiobook or like a nonsense audiobook. I'm re-listening to Akatar right now, so it's kind of perfect to put it on because I've already listened to it. I don't have to super pay attention. We're just gonna go. We're just gonna keep going.
To sew on this gold hem detail, you actually want to sew your gold piece right side to your skirt wrong side. That way when you flip it over, you will have your right side out on your skirt's right side. I did that wrong the first time, so learn from my mistakes, please. And I was trying really hard not to put pins in where you were going to be able to see the holes in this gold material, which was a worry of mine, but the closer I got to the con, the less I was worrying about it. And my sewing machine, for whatever reason, did not want to sew through this, so I ended up hand stitching all of the gold details down. I started on the hem by just going around the very hem on the seam allowance, and then going back over the edge with just a straight stitch. For the collar, I had 2 layers of white and then a layer of gold, and I put the layer of gold in between them, sewed with my overlock all the way around the edges, and then cut these down to 1/2 inch all the way around before pinning them up and hand tacking it all down invisibly. From both sides, might I add. This actually was really cathartic for some reason. I don't know why I loved making this collar. Would I recommend making it like this? No, absolutely not. You should just put a gold trim all the way around, like cut out a 1-inch piece and sew it down. Like, don't do that. That was a lot. For the plackets, I sewed 2 together before once again sewing around at the seam allowance, and then I hand stitched them onto the cuffs and the cloak the same way by just barely going in on the bottom piece around the edge.
I have slow and steady been working to get Frieren together. I just attached the cuffs, and now we're going to finish attaching the cuffs. I have actually just realized, oh my god, I keep doing this where I keep sewing things the wrong way. So I now have to take the cuffs back off because I'm trying to do fancy stuff here and it's just not working for me. Cool. Okay, at least I realized it now. You know, in the moment I was looking at it and I was also thinking, this doesn't feel right. Anyways, the capelet just needs this trim sewn down and the collar attached, and the collar is all done and ready to be attached. I've been doing so much hand sewing, but it's looking so cute. It's gonna be so freaking cute when it's all done. And my staff is coming tomorrow, and I'm also doing my hair tomorrow because I do not have time to do the wig. I still have to do my Elizabeth wig. I think our skirt hem is actually just gonna stay stitched like this and ugly. Literally don't think I'm doing anything different with the neckline. I might trim it back a little bit. Other than that, it is also staying like that because it'll be under the capelet anyways. That's our update. That's our update.
I used UV resin for everything in this, and I have this little tray, and I just used 3 different sizes of circles. I only needed 2, but I basically just slowly put in the resin and then used a lighter to pop the bubbles before putting on the UV lamp. For the little drippy pieces though, I did in fact cast those in silicone a few weeks ago. You can look at that in my learning silicone video. There were some imperfections on where I tried to put a pre-drilled hole, so I had to fix that quite a bit. It was really finagly. And then I painted them with Tester's enamel paint, both gold and red. I did the gold first, and then I went in and did the red before letting those completely dry and using a clear coat on top and then E6000ing them on. Okay, now we're getting into the jewelry, so here we go. This is a lot I've taught myself. My gold posts have a flat bottom, but I need them to have an eye, so I cut that off with some wire cutters and then twisted my own eye. I ended up using my extra pieces of round gems as like a little detail for the earrings, and I'm just using a 16th inch drill bit to drill a hole through them very, very carefully. I have to pinch it really tight before I put that eye bar that I just made through, cut off the excess, and then twist another eye on the other side. These ended up super off-center, so I had to purposefully put them both off-center the same amount, and it ended up cute. I then re-drilled the hole in the red dangly bit before finding some medium-sized jump rings and putting that through there. The drill bit did end up taking off my little bit of repair, so I decided to just throw the jump ring on there and then just put more UV resin on while the jump ring was on, because I feel like it would just be more secure and then I wouldn't have to re-drill the hole a bunch of times and just be like in an endless loop. So the jump rings are just resined on there now. And then I used that same size jump ring to attach the actual part that goes in your ear, the earring part. I should learn what that's called. And the gem. And then once the dangly parts were done, I lined them up and made sure that the gems would all be facing the correct way. And I realized I needed one more jump ring in between them so that they would all hang properly. So I added that. And then, ta-da, we have earrings, yay.
Real quick insert. All of the sewing is done except, you know, I really should just go overlock around the neck hole, just trim it down to where I want it and overlock it. But I did leave this whole section of the hem raw. However, I found this gold trim in my drawer, so I'm just gonna sew this around the hem. Such an easy little fix. I bought this stuff on Amazon, but I'm really glad I unboxed it now because this side looks great. This side is really scuffed, so I'm just gonna repaint this whole gem, but we're looking like really good, like really, really close to being done, which is so exciting.
Super last minute, I decided to add a collar to the neckline, and I just figured I would do like a little gold piece of trim like everything else is. I cut down the neckline in the front just slightly so it wouldn't be super duper tight, and then I just sewed this on 1/4 of an inch, folded it over, hand tacked it down. We've been doing it the whole time. It's nothing new. For the staff, I just used my Angelus red paint. It was like a pretty good match, and it stuck really well.
Okay, hi, we are now super post WonderCon where I actually wore Frieren. So let me just, you know, do like a final little deep dive of the costume. Let me first start off by saying this looked way, way better than I thought it was going to. And then, you know, like, let's just get into our mistakes. There was like just like a few. Where's the cloak? Where's the capelet? So obviously my collar was just the wrong side. It just completely overlaps on the wrong side, and it also doesn't match fully because I did a hook and bar and the bar is way too close. But you know, like it was actually totally fine. And then there's also supposed to be a little bit of black poking up on the inside of this, which is kind of funny because it looks like that is just like the shirt continuation is what you would think, that it's like a turtleneck shirt underneath, but no, it's actually like a teensy bit lower of a neckline than this, but then it's just like white. It's like this white stripe, like, you know, because it's animated, it's not like real clothing physics. But I really liked the way that this kind of like gold kind of peeked through, and it would be so easy to just throw a little bit of black on the inside of this, but I actually don't know that it needs it. And I did in fact use my real hair, and I did in fact, hang on, cut these sections to do her bang, and I haven't evened out the rest of my front pieces yet. So like these need trimmed to match that. So I have my hair like, oh, it was like this earlier, and these pieces were just like blunt edge. And I was like, oh, brush those away. That needs fixed. But it's not the first time I've done it, and it's not gonna be the last time I do it either. I got so many compliments on having the elf ears. I have like nice silicone ones that are shorter, so they're not as obvious as the ones that just go behind your ears and that stick like really far out. Mine are only like this long probably, and they're fully silicone, and they actually match my skin tone really well, and they just kind of like come like right around here. And I got a lot of compliments on them, but the most compliments I got was actually on the earrings. There was a lot of people that were like, oh my gosh, you actually have the earrings too. And I was like, yeah, except the earrings kept getting stuck in the collar. Like they were just slightly too long. So I think if I were to do them again, I would not do that little like gem in the between the red parts. I would just have the red because it would be like up here and it wouldn't be like down here getting stuck in there. Yeah, and then the staff worked perfectly. The bottom of the staff got really banged up because I was like banging it on the ground, as you would expect. But yeah, and I'm so glad I did the cuffs. I don't know if I even talked about it. So I wore this on Friday, and I was watching an episode on Wednesday, and I went, oh no, oh, the cuffs aren't all white like I thought they were. And I had just finished securing this part of the placket to the cuff, to the dress, and I was like, oh man, like I don't want to take it all back apart, like it's gonna be a nightmare. And so on Thursday I was finishing up some other stuff, and I was like, well, I could just go cut some strips of gold, but then I was like, no, it won't be that noticeable, it'll be fine. And then at like 6 p.m. on Thursday, of course, to be fair, the con didn't even open until like noon on Friday, so I had plenty of time Friday morning. But at like 6 p.m., I decided, oh man, I really want the gold on the cuffs. So I just cut a couple, I think this one was like 3 inches, and then this one was 1 inch, and I just literally lined up the raw edge to the edge of the placket there and attached it, and then I just took like 1/2 inch inside this and just literally hand stitched it to the inside cuff. And then pretty much the same with this. I just hand sewed this on at 1/4 inch, folded it around, and then just sewed this down. Because I know that this swimsuit spandex does not fray, I was totally okay with just having those raw edges in there. And the gold really makes the cuffs stand out. I also would make the cuffs way bigger in the future if I were to like redo any of this, which I don't think I need to, because it looked so freaking good. So, you know, I also might potentially redo this trim and also just make this whole bottom gold section like twice as big. I think is literally the only thing I think I would change is making this bigger. Yeah, I saw a couple Frierens at con, none on Friday, funnily enough, but there was 2 I think I saw on Saturday, and then like 2 others that I saw on Sunday, and I was like, hi girlies, hi. Thank you for watching this super quick costume. This is like so beginner friendly in my mind, like just making your own stripe fabric or buying a stripe fabric and then just literally making a shirt and a circle skirt. The draft for the capelet was so easy. Like I'm just gonna start making capes right and left because I can take this pattern and just extend the hem however long I want it now. Like I now have infinite cape abilities, cloak, whatever. You get it, you get me. But Thank you for joining me here for Frieren. I hope you enjoyed it. I think I've said that like 6 times now, but I will see you in the next one. Bye!